Hi everyone, this is Professor Philip Travis, and this announcement is for week 3 of Military History, History 360 here at Eastern Oregon University. This week we are going to begin our first of 2 weeks in which we will examine the American Civil War. And our reading from this week comes from Ways of War, Chapter 6. There is also a quiz on that reading this week. Now, right now, our reading assignments are relatively light. Now, I do want, because as we get towards the second half of the term, the reading assignments will go up a lot if you're not reading now some of the additional readings for the class. So don't forget as we move forward, there are 2 papers that we do in this class. The first paper is a paper in which you will be basically writing an analysis between the E.B. Sledge with the Old Breed book and the Philip Caputo book, A Rumor of War. Sledge, of course, about fighting on the Pacific Islands during the Second World War, and of course Caputo about the experience in the Vietnam War during the late 60s. So that paper, you're going to read both those books, and you need to kind of find a central theme and use the 2 books to defend that central theme. And then, of course, the last assignment in class is a 2-page paper based on the reading of Brian Glenn Williams' book, Counter Jihad, about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But my point of saying this is I highly recommend right now that in addition to doing your reading from the textbook, that you read ahead. Like if I was you right now, even though I know we're focusing on the Civil War, we're thinking about the Civil War, I would definitely try to find time to start the E.B. Sledge book so you can get ahead on that stuff, so that way when we come to the 2 weeks where the book is really assigned, you'll kind of already be in there and got a feel for it to help you kind of be a little bit ahead of the curve on that. So we're reading Chapter 6. There's a quiz in Chapter 6 this week. We are looking at the American Civil War, the first part of the American Civil War, from its beginning of 1861 until really the turning point in 1863, which of course comes with the battles of Gettysburg and on the Mississippi, the Battle of Vicksburg, all surrounding the period of July 4th in 1863. And so next week we will look at from Gettysburg and Vicksburg on down to the end of the American Civil War. The factoid for this week is related to the picture that you see here, and I'll talk about it in just a second. This picture is from the Battle of Antietam. I mean, it's a painting, obviously, but this painting here is from the Battle of Antietam, the bloodiest single day in American military history. Now, before I talk about the factoid specifically for just a second, I do want to point out that in the discussion forum, be sure if I make a post in the discussion forum or I do a big long reply and you see those big headers on there, please note that it's a good idea to read those. Usually I'm putting things in there that might be good to know for the test. So like, for example, the American Revolution stuff, you could probably get a test question that says something like, the American Revolution, true or false, the American Revolution was a revolution which Americans won solely because they used, guerrilla warfare style tactics. And clearly, according to the discussion and the reading, that's false. That actually the Americans prevailed in the American Revolution largely because of international assistance, both direct from the French, as well as volunteers like Baron von Steuben, and also indirect from countries like the Spanish monarchy, who had little interest in American democratic institutions, but very much disliked the British. We know that the American Revolution really could not have succeeded without international support. We also know the American Revolution couldn't have succeeded without the army eventually being able to function as a formal military capable of engaging the British in major battlefield engagements, and of course the training by officers like Marquis de Lafayette, the French officer, Baron von Steuben, the funding from the Franco-American Alliance, as well as the troops, the soldiers, and the Navy that they brought to bear were all important in that. So make sure you pay attention to the posts that I make in the discussion forum. I'm sure everybody is. I want to just make sure everybody knows that if you see one of those posts where it's a big long post with big header, um, that material should be treated as though it is class material, and as a result, that aspects of it, big aspects of it, I'm not going to try to be real picky about little nuances about it, but we should know um, some of those big themes when it comes to test time. So make sure you pay attention to those. All right, the factoid. So we're talking about the first part of the American Civil War, 1861 to 1863. And this first period of the war, of course, was associated with a number of pretty stunning Confederate victories. And those Confederate victories, the goal of the Confederacy was to surround and threaten the Union capital of Washington, D.C., and force Abraham Lincoln and the Union to sign um, a treaty agreement recognizing the Confederacy. In addition to this, there were Confederate diplomats that were trying to gain alliances from the British, for example, hoping that a British alliance might further compel the Union to recognize the Confederacy. So, in the attempts to do that, Robert E. Lee's forces of the Confederacy launched a couple of ventures into Northern Territory. Of course, in 1863, the most notorious of those results in the defeat of Robert E. Lee's forces at the Battle of Gettysburg in July of 1863. Now, before that, a year prior, or a little bit less than a year prior, um, um, Robert E. Lee's forces ventured into Maryland and engaged the Union. As you see in this painting here, an artist's interpretation of what part of the Battle of Antietam might have looked like, engaged the Union in the infamous Battle of Antietam. And this is the factoid. The Battle of Antietam, fought in Maryland, remains to this day the single bloodiest day in American military history, with combined Union and Confederate casualties, killed, wounded, or missing in action, at over 22,000. And this, of course, these numbers were part and parcel to the advanced technology being used in this war. Widespread use of the rifle for infantry, much more advanced artillery as well, results in massive casualties in many of the American Civil War battles. And the Battle of Antietam infamously goes down as the bloodiest single day in American military history, with combined casualties, killed, wounded, or missing in action, at over 22,000. Interestingly, interestingly, the battle was not really won by anybody, but the Union achieved a strategic victory in the sense that Robert E. Lee's forces left and returned to Virginia. And so, in a strategic sense, it was a Union victory, albeit with a massive cost, but it wasn't really battlefield tactical victory for anyone per se, but a strategic victory for the Union, albeit at a massive cost. All right, that's the factoid for this week. Um, I'm using the discussion board like I did last week. It's an easier way to tabulate these factoids, so I'm trying this out for this class this term. So please go into that discussion board, make your little brief summation of this factoid, get your bonus point added to a test score at the end of the term, and let's have a really great week. I'll see you in the discussion forum.